Back when the 200th YCS was initially revealed to be in Columbus, Ohio, I decided because it was very close to me and very close to where my friend Lucas Peterson lives, that I would ask him to come out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Retirement and play at that event. Because even though he still writes articles for TCGplayer.com, and even though he still plays the game casually and goes to a couple regional qualifiers every year, it had been a very long time, almost 2 years, since he had been to a big event like a YCS or WCQ, and I thought that the 200th YCS was the perfect event because you get so much for entering those events. They give you a mat, they give you a field center, all sorts of cool stuff, and I really wanted to see him again, so I asked him to come to that event, and he agreed. So he showed up, and on Sunday, when I was sort of asking him how he felt about new Yu-Gi-Oh! 2018 Yu-Gi-Oh!, he said something that has not been able to get out of my head since that day, and what he said to me was that he enjoyed and had a lot of fun in every game, whether or not he won or lost, as long as he got to play a card. And that really stuck with me because it seems like in 2018, more so than any other year of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, people just don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And don't get me wrong, we've always had combo decks, we've always had FTK decks in certain formats, but it seems like 2018 in particular, we've had so many decks out there, even the decks that people see as more rogue meta-ish strategies like Altergeist and Thunder Dragons don't want you to play the game because Thunder Dragons have Colossus to prevent you from searching, Altergeist play floodgates like Secret Village or Rivalry of Warlords, and then obviously things like actual FTK decks don't even want you to have a turn, but even decks like Goki, which aren't technically an FTK and don't technically restrict you from searching, they want to extra link you so you don't actually get a chance to play any of your cards, and they just want to win on the first turn. Ironically, the only deck out there right now that doesn't floodgate you and doesn't lock you out of playing is Sky Strikers. Many people complain about Sky Strikers, but when you really think about it, that's like the most fair, popular deck out there right now. It's very skill intensive to play, you have to do the right searches at the right time, and it just ends with like a 1500 attack monster with a couple negates, which means that it actually wants interaction from both players, and that's cool that it's a very popular deck, even though people still complain about it. More so than any other deck out there, Sky Strikers is the one that lets you play the game the most. And while that has stayed in my mind and I have been thinking about it, what got to me even more than that was that after he told me that he liked playing when he actually got to play cards, he told me that he likely would never enter a competitive event like a YCS or a WCQ ever again, and that really hurt. I mean, I mentioned on Thanksgiving that it definitely sucks when people leave Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever, but he said that he basically just can't handle competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore. And it's not that he doesn't like Yu-Gi-Oh! He still wants to play casually and still play at regional qualifiers and just play fun decks, but as far as competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes, to him, he said it just changed too much from what he knew it as in like 2014, 2015, and even 2016 when we went to that WCQ, and that really stuck with me, and that's what I've been thinking about over the past couple months, the state of Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2018, more so than any other period in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. The past 2 years, there's been so many FTK strategies, so many crazy strategies that end in like 4 negates. If you go back to like 2014, the combo decks, the really big combo decks like Sylvans and Lightsworn Rulers and just Mythic Rulers, those decks just ended with like a couple negations sometimes, and they didn't always open those ridiculous combos. Very often those combos were 2 and 3 card combos, where nowadays we have Armageddonite being a 1 card FTK. And I know there's going to be some comments in this video saying, well, aren't you being a hypocrite? Because I've made a video talking about how extra linking doesn't happen as often as you think it does, and how FTKs don't happen as often as you think it does. And in those videos, I want to talk about, and I want to mention in today's video, that I just didn't have enough foresight to see how bad this game would get in terms of, man, FTK is like an actual viable strategy. Even though it sort of underperformed at YCS Pasadena, it definitely overperformed at the previous 2 YCSs, and the only reason it did so bad at Pasadena was because people were over side decking for it, so it didn't make it out of the early rounds. But just in general, the fact that an FTK is actually competitively viable in the same year that we had another FTK viable, Pendulum FTK, and even things like Gem Knight FTK, which while they're just a rogue strategy are still pretty good, just blows my mind. We've never had 3 viable FTKs in a single year year ever in like the 20 years that Yu-Gi-Oh has been around, and yet 2018 we see 3 of them being pretty good and topping events. That's not a good thing. I mean, we all can know that, but I mean, I really just want to say that that's not a good sign. That does not mean that the game is in a healthy standpoint. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is in a very weird spot right now where the next couple of years are really going to determine how long this game stays around for. And I'm not saying that Yu-Gi-Oh is dying, and I'm not saying that I think Yu-Gi-Oh is going to die anytime soon, but I am saying that we're in a very pivotal time period for Yu-Gi-Oh in terms of the competitive landscape. Konami is obviously focusing a lot on Duel Links right now, but I think they really have to be careful with the TCG. Obviously, tournament numbers are still pretty high. I mean, they have been lower than maybe some previous years, but relative to like old school Yu-Gi-Oh like 5 or 10 years ago, they're still much higher. People are still interested in playing the game. It is a little worrying that YCS Pasadena only had 1,400 people, when in the past California regional events have had 1,000 people. That's a little worrying, but a lot of people didn't want to play against the FTK strategy. But we're just in a very strange position. Konami really has to look at cards that they're keeping off the ban list, things like Firewall Dragon, and ask themselves, okay, is it worth keeping this card around just to appease the anime fans, or are we actively killing our own card game? And I think in this case, in the state of Yu-Gi-Oh how it is right now, they are choosing to keep cards around that are hurting the game's overall health. And this has always been the case, but I think more so than ever, cards like Firewall Dragon, cards like Gumblar Dragon are just way too toxic to have in the metagame. And I do want to address, because it was brought up in a Farfa video as well as a Davinator video, that there was a quote of mine that I think wasn't misquoted but was said, or misinterpreted rather, and I want to address that now. So here's what Dave said, and then I'll tell you what I actually meant by my statement.
Because I believe it was Dzeeff that said one time, there are plenty of really good cards in this game, but the only ones that everyone plays are the ones that are unfair. If a card is too fair, no one uses it. It doesn't matter if it's really nifty or its effect is cool. If it's like a 1-for-1, it's probably bad. So, in order to really make sure the competitive scene is moving forward, we do need cards like Firewall Dragon that facilitate the mechanic to a broken level to actually kind of keep the game moving forward. Because we want to know the next dumb firewall loop. What is it? We got to keep buying product to do that. It keeps the game alive. It keeps everything healthy. However, him being abused for degenerate burn loops was certainly not the spirit of the card. So it comes down to whether or not we want to keep Firewall Dragon for the betterment of Lynx and start banning things around him, or just get rid of the problem card.
Now, if you remember that video that he was referencing there, it was that fair Yu-Gi-Oh cards don't win, but there's a very big difference between someone as a player looking to play unfair cards and Konami as a company deciding to print or not ban unfair cards, and I think Dave sort of accidentally crossed them over and thought that they meant the same thing. So in the case of a player's perspective, you want to play the best possible cards available to you. If Firewall Dragon is in the game and you can play a deck with Firewall Dragon, well, of course you should be playing Firewall Dragon because it's beyond broken. However, that does not translate to Konami's perspective, which is where I think Dave sort of misinterpreted what I was saying. And I don't fault Dave, he doesn't really play competitively, but Konami should not allow unfair cards like Firewall Dragon to exist just because players are playing them, because as a player you're just trying to do the best you can to actually win, but as a company like Konami, you're trying to do the best to keep a healthy play environment, which Firewall Dragon is not doing. It's insane to think about, and this is maybe a bold statement, but I would argue that the whole link summoning mechanic wouldn't be an issue if Firewall Dragon had been banned a long time ago. Think of all the crazy decks from the past year in 2018, and we're coming to the end of 2018. There aren't any major events that I know of. There's no UDS events, there's no YCS events, nothing along those lines, just regional qualifiers. Think of all the craziness that could have been avoided. Think of all the toxicity that could have been avoided if Konami would have just hit Firewall Dragon and banned it several formats ago. It would have been a fantastic year for Yu-Gi-Oh! Goki still probably would be played just because they're all floaters and they do so many different things, and Link monsters are still very powerful, but Firewall Dragon being gone would prevent a lot of the extra linking strategies, would prevent a lot of the FTKing strategies. It is the most toxic card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! As of right now, and it shouldn't be in the game. And I realize that the week that I'm posting this video, it is extremely likely that a ban list could go up, but I think realistically they're gonna wait on the ban list, and the reason they're gonna wait for the ban list is because there aren't any major events, and I think that's terrible. I really do think it's a horrible idea, but it seems like a very Konami thing to do, and this really sucks because one of the things that I've done more so than any other Yu-Gi tuber, and I really mean this, is I have defended the set ban list dates not existing time and time again, and the reason that I defended them is because I know why Konami does it, and they did it originally. They implemented those not set ban list dates because they felt pressured to release ban lists at certain times when the format didn't need it. Now the counterpoint to that and how it should be implemented is that in the case where the format does need a ban list at that first no sooner than date, they have to implement the ban list on that date because that's how the system should work. If a ban list needs to happen, they should do a ban list. And this past format right now that ended on November 20th, although it's still going, but that the no sooner than when it could be implemented was November 20th, which would have been right after YCS Pasadena, they should have implemented a new ban list. That would have been perfect. I've said time and time again, the reason the set ban list dates or the no set ban list dates work is because they don't need to rush ban lists out when they're not needed. But right now, Konami, if you're listening, I'm sure they're not, you need to implement a ban list. Your player base is leaving and you're not caring, and it just blows my mind that Firewall Dragon hasn't been banned, that it hasn't been eroded. I know I've talked a lot in this video about Firewall Dragon, but it truly is just sort of the culmination of everything wrong with 2018 Yu-Gi-Oh! And don't get me wrong, I know that like nostalgic players will watch this video and say, ha, I knew 2018 Yu-Gi-Oh! is terrible, I should just go back to old school. But in the games where Firewall Dragon doesn't happen, in the games where you're not playing against FTK decks or Extra Link decks, I've had some of the most fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! Matches than I ever have just in this past year. It's just when you play those really heavy combo strategies or those floodgate strategies, it totally takes away any of the fun. And obviously, I know I play Altergeist, so I'm part of the problem, but when you're in a format where you have to play a floodgate deck or a combo deck, you can't just actively pick neither and then hope to do well unless you're playing Skyscrapers. You have to use the tools at your disposal, which kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with the firewall thing that Dzeeff said. If Firewall Dragon, if broken cards exist, the players are allowed to use them. They're actually encouraged to use them. It's just that Konami shouldn't allow those cards to exist. Things like Gozen Match and Rivalry of Warlords probably shouldn't be at 3 copies per deck, but if they are, the decks that can play those cards are going to play those cards. They're not obligated to implement a gentleman's agreement to not play floodgates and to not extra link their opponent. Everyone's just going to tournaments to win. I just wish winning involved playing the game that I love in Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway though, thanks for watching this video. I know it's kind of a rambly discussion. This has just been something that's been building up in me ever since that 200th YCS, and we've seen it the format actually get much worse from the format at that event. Because at that event, it was pretty much just Skystrikers and Trick Stars and Invoked and all sorts of crazy strategies. Goki wasn't even that popular at the 200th YCS. You saw all sorts of craziness happening. That was one of the most diverse like top 64s that I've ever seen. But right after that, the YCS has just got worse and worse and worse to where we are right now, where pretty much every other game at a tournament, you're not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And let me tell you guys, I want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! But I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.